This is Dan Schneider. This is another one of my Biorama interview series. My guest is Bruce Ario. He's a writer and a poet that I've known for over 20 years. He lives in the Minneapolis area in Minnesota, and I will be speaking with him for the next couple of hours about his life and times. People who have been regular readers of my website, E-Cosmoetica, may have seen the name Bruce Ario several times. You may have seen some of the poems that I have linked on my Verse Magnifique page. You may have seen him listed in my Uptown Poetry group. You may have seen some of the videos that I've done of some of his poems over the last couple of years as well. Bruce is a writer and a poet that I met back in the early 1990s when I was living in the Twin Cities area, and I will be talking with him about his life and times. So, Bruce, let me just start by asking you, what is your full name?
My full name is Bruce Dwayne Ario.
And when were you born?
I was born on April 29th, 1955.
And you were born in Minneapolis, or were you born somewhere else and just moved there as a child?
I was born up on what we call the Iron Range, which is in northern Minnesota in a small town. I was living in Gilbert, or my parents were living in Gilbert, but there was no hospital in Gilbert. I was born in a town called Virginia, Minnesota, which is kind of up by Duluth, west of Duluth, about that latitude. And then I moved on to Minneapolis when I was 2 years old.
Oh, okay. So your whole family then moved down to the Minneapolis area?
Yeah, we first moved into a suburb of Minneapolis called Ridgefield, which is an inner ring suburb of Minneapolis. And then we moved into the city of Minneapolis when I was 6 years old, and in first grade, middle of my first grade year.
Well, before I ask you about your youth, let me ask you a bit of background about your family. Ario, A-R-I-O, is that a French name?
No, it could be, but if you knew the full name, you would probably be able to guess. It's Ariovistus. Ariovistus shortened to Ario, so it's German. Prussian, actually, Prussian.
So let me ask you about your parents. I know, I believe both of your parents died. I think your mother died a couple of years ago, and your father died a few years before that.
My mother died 2 years ago now, and my dad died about 5 years ago.
What were their professions?
My dad was a high school teacher. He taught at the high school that I went to. My mother was a clerk in the library, Hennepin County Library System, which is the county that includes Minneapolis. She was an aide kind of worker. She worked there for 20 years, got her 20 years in. But basically, I always thought of her as a homemaker. She was a homemaker when I was growing up.
I don't believe I've met any of your siblings, but I do believe you do have siblings. How many do you have, and what are their names, or what, are they older or younger, or what?
I got an older brother, Joel. He's 2 years older than me. He's married, has 3 boys, 2 in college. Well, one graduated now from college at Boston College. And the other one is in Boston College, and he's got his son Benny must be about 11 years old now, something like that. And then I got another brother that's 2 years younger than me, and he lives down in just I believe north of Tampa in Florida, Palm Springs or Palm Beach. I can't remember the name of the community, but it's just north of Tampa. He moved down there about a year ago, and I have a younger brother than that who is 10 years younger than me, and he's got a wife and a boy that's in high school, senior in high school, and 2 daughters.
We'll talk a little bit later about your religiousness, but When you were growing up, were you raised in a religious background, or was your family a bunch of atheists or agnostics, or what?
No, my family was. My dad was pretty religious. So was my mother. They weren't traditionalists. They were free thinkers. But they went to church. They went to a Lutheran church. Raised us in a Lutheran church. And my dad was the director of a summer Bible camp, Lutheran Bible camp. So in many ways, it was the traditional religious upbringing. But it wasn't anything that they forced on us, and they never. I mean, we were expected to go to church, and we did. We just kind of accepted that. All of our friends were in church, and but they didn't. They did not force any dogma on us or have us believe any particular way that they told us how we had to believe. They kind of left it up to what the church instructed us. They approved of us going to church, but it wasn't a requirement.
What are some of your earliest memories, be it at home or at school or with your friends? Because I would think you would have had your earliest memories in the early 60s. Do you remember having to do the duck and cover for in case there was a nuclear war at school, that kind of
Oh
thing?
yeah, we did that. It would ring the air raid siren in the school, and we would go out into the hall with our coats and bend over facing the wall, put our head between our knees, and put our coats over the back of our necks. And yeah, the Russians. Everybody was worried about the Russians attacking. It was a real threat.
Um, did you watch a lot of television? Did you go to movies? Did you play a lot of games? What kind of things did you do to socialize as a young boy?
Well, I watched a fair amount of TV, but basically I was out doing things. Playing football with friends, baseball, depending on the season. Um, Playing games like kick the can, ollie ollie entry. Just kind of, especially when I got up to be about fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade. That's when my parents would let me go over several blocks over to a friend's house. I spent a lot of time outside. It's you don't see that anymore in society. Maybe getting too dangerous. I don't know. But at the time that I was raised, we were out in the yards running around, throwing snowballs at cars, that kind of thing.
Um, since you grew up in Minneapolis, was that was before global warming came to a fore? Were the winters usually long and filled with snow when you were growing up?
Yeah, winter could start in October, sometimes in September, and go until April, through April. I remember having snow in June. Um, Winters were long. I was a hockey player. After sixth grade, I joined the park board hockey team, and that's kind of how I got through winter. Uh, it wasn't considered a burden. It was considered kind of fun. We had our games, and um, we our parents dressed us warm, and no, we went outside every day to the hockey rink. Every single day to the hockey rink.
Did you read a lot?
I did not read a lot. That's kind of a gap in my life, or something that I wish I had done more of. We were, of course, forced to read a certain amount of books in our school, and I read like Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer and uh, some of the other ones in grade school. I mainly remember Huckleberry Finn, and I did not read. I was not a serious reader at that time. I more or less was just up with my friends, having a good time.
What kind of a student were you?
I was always a good student. I was always high track. Grade school, I was in the high group. Junior high, there weren't so many divisions that way, but and then again in high school, I got into the high track classes. My grades were good. I don't believe I was in the top 2%, but I was like just barely below that. I was like National Honor Society. I went to Boys State for the American Legion, which is kind of a story in itself. And I did what was asked of me, but not a whole lot more.
Yeah. Is there any story from your youth or family sort of fable? Every family has their own sort of little legends that you would want someone watching this maybe in 20 or 50 or 100 years to know about the Ario family. Was there like some time that an uncle came at Christmas and did something stupid, or was there a time that your brother got into a fight with someone? What 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 anecdote might you have from your early youth that sticks the most in your mind all these years later?
The story that I love to tell was my dad's director of a summer Bible camp. He pulled pranks on the campers, and it was a good time. He started this thing one week with going up to campers and saying, "I believe you have a case of the lobes." And he would look at their ears, and he'd say, "Yeah, I think you got the lobes." Then go to the nurse, and the nurse would paint him up with iodine. And one time, the nurse even glued toothpicks to the guy's ears to bring in the sun. And the kids were very serious about it. They believed it wholeheartedly that they had the lobes, and they had iodine across their face and stuff like that. Another time, he said, "Did anybody see the hosendote out in the woods? You know, the hosendote looks like it's been active again." And he had the kids all worried about the hosendote. And he took out a shotgun and came around the building and fired off a shot. He goes, "I just missed it, you guys." You know, killed all the campers. Another time, he had us dress up in sheets over our heads. He made eye holes, and he had us dress up in sheets, and we were the Wapagasset ghosts. And the girls, of course, I'm not trying to sound sexist, but at that time, the girls were all scared. They screamed when we knocked on their windows and stuff like that. But the guys, the boys, they chased us, and we ran across campus with the boys chasing us. You know, "We're gonna get you guys." That was really a joy to be up at that Bible camp. I met thousands of people over the course, about 1,000 a summer. We were up there 7 summers. I knew quite a few people. Some of them are still my friends at this time.
How about when you hit your teen years? Were you an awkward teen? How did you handle first, recognizing, that you like girls and whatnot? Did you have a girlfriend when you were young, or was it hard going?
It was about average. I was certainly no Don Juan, but I always had a girl that I was interested in. Whether she was interested in me was varying. Sometimes a girl would take interest in me, and I wasn't particularly. But it was kind of awkward and rough going. I didn't really kiss a girl until 8th grade at a Schneider kind of party. And I was always attracted, of course, to the prettiest girls, but I wasn't the biggest Don Juan in class, so I did not get their attention too much. But I had a high school girlfriend, one that was more serious, and I did not lose my virginity until college, and but it was a little bit awkward. I wasn't really comfortable. There was a lot of stuff I didn't understand about girls because I had never had a sister, and I didn't know how to really relate to girls that well.
When you got to high school, were you still a good student as you were when you were younger?
Yeah, I was a good student through high school, yes. And then I into college, I was a good student as well. I went to a considered the top academic school in Minnesota, Carleton College. I went to Carleton 2 years. Found it to be kind of a Peyton place. I don't know if you know what I mean by Peyton place.
Yeah.
But it was claustrophobic for me, and I had to get out of there and go back to Minneapolis and finish up at the U.
Well, you have online at your own website, and I'll link to it below this video. You have written about in works and whatnot about your alcoholism and mental health problems. When did mental health issues and/or alcoholism first enter your life? Was it during your teen years?
Well, I don't think I was unusual in my amount of drinking. I mean, I began to go to high school beggars in high school. Smoking marijuana started in ninth grade before drinking, and but nobody ever, I was considered very level-headed, rational, could hold my booze, and knew my limit, and that's kind of how I think I was perceived in throughout high school as somebody that liked to drink a lot of beer, but somebody who could hold his liquor and not get into too much trouble. And certainly no mental illness was ever discussed. It wasn't until I was up at the U after graduating that I got into a car accident and I sustained a head injury. And that's when everybody said, that's when I noticed you had problems. Up until that point, you were level-headed, you were rational. But when you had that head injury, you started talking about Jesus, talking about angels, and talking about all the problems of society, all the negative things. Now, that also coincided with the breakup of a girl, the first woman I really had a full-blown physical relationship with. So some people might have thought that's what it was, but people that knew me said they were pretty convinced it was the head injury and that threw me into schizophrenia because I was feeling a lot of stress, a lot of pressure in my mind, like somebody had hit me over the head with a hammer and or a sledgehammer, and a lot of pain, and I was looking for any kind of escape. And when I heard about schizophrenia, it kind of like I thought maybe that's what this is, and I questioned it, and that's what I got diagnosed as being schizophrenic. My first doctor said it was a drug-induced psychosis. I'd taken a lot of psilocybin mushrooms to kind of relieve my stress in my mind, and I kind of free-floated off into the cosmos. And I coached it in terms of a religious experience, but the doctors, of course, noticed that I couldn't function on any kind of job, and they were very concerned about that. And that's how I got diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Well, you went to study law, but did the accident and the mental problems put a kibosh on that?
Undoubtedly. I believe I could have handled law school if I had never had the car accident. But from day one, it was a real challenge. I was off in my own space and just kind of existing by being very stone-faced and, not, being very straightforward. At least trying to keep a grip on things. And that grip was tied up with a girl who did not return my love, and so I kind of lost my focus. And that would have been not such a big issue. I had broken up with women before, and I knew what that kind of felt like and how to handle it. But this time I did not know, and I lost my focus. Before I knew it, I could not read a page. I would go to the library in the morning and be on the same page an hour later, the same word an hour later, and not dancing at all. I don't think that would have been the case, if I had not had the head injury. I don't know if I would have ever gotten into law school if I never had the head injury. I was an econ major, and I applied for a job at the Board of Governors. Now, I applied for the job before I had the car accident, But by the time I got the interview, I had the car accident, and I went in and totally blew the interview, talking about, you know, far out things and stuff like that. And I totally blew the interview. Although my grades had been quite high, I had 3.76 GPA, I had a 4.0 in my major. I would have been a good candidate for the job, and I might have become an economist, never thinking about law school. But when I got the accident and then looking for some way to redeem, redeem myself, you know, law school seemed like it's something I could bite off and handle. And when I didn't, of course, it was a big hardship. You know, I still have pangs of pain when I feel about the fact that I did not make it through law school. I only completed 2 years. It's still something that I'm thinking about doing is, and I'm pretty sure I will, is go back to law school and take my 3rd year when I retire, because the university offers free tuition to people when they're over 65, and I can go back and I can't get a JD, but I can at least audit my 3rd year just as the satisfaction of saying I completed 3 years of law school. I like law. I find it very interesting. It's a good tool. I think it's widely misused by a lot of people, but I want to be somebody that uses it correctly, and I still use the tools. If we get off to that in another area of the interview, I will tell you about how I use some of the tools I learned in law school to be an advocate for mental illness.
Do you think that if you hadn't had the accident, you might not have manifested mental illness?
That's a hot topic with me and my doctor. My doctor doesn't know. He said he thinks that the accident was a straw that broke the camel's back, but he doesn't know if I would have ever had mental illness without the accident. He's not sure. He thinks I might have had a predisposition, which maybe is true. I'm not sure. But when I had the accident, like I said, schizophrenia seemed to be something that brought me, the diagnosis of schizophrenia seemed to bring me some kind of relief. And I didn't have that sense of relief. I didn't have really the insight to think it was a car accident. That was something that surfaced years later.
Before I get into things like art and writing and religion, the deeper stuff, let's talk a little bit about the scope of your life, because this accident would have happened, I guess, in your early 20s or so. So after recovering from that, and I know there was periods where you were unemployed and you had some severe mental ills, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. What kind of jobs have you held over the course of your life?
Okay, I started working at 10 years old with the paperwork, and I had a job in high school, you know, as an accountant person at a pharmacy, and then I worked in the mailroom at Carlton, and then I was a bartender pretty myself through at times at the U. I was a bartender. I got to be 18, the age of eligible drinking, and I was about 19, and I was a bartender, and I did that for a few years, and that was not good for my what happened that I kind of became an alcoholic after the car accident as well, and then I had a job at the Internal Revenue Service, which is a good job, but I left that to go to law school, and then while I was in law school, I had maybe my highest paying job. I was getting paid $50 an hour, which was back in the 80s, so it'd be pretty high pay now. And I was teaching how to take the LSAT, and that was the highest paying job I ever had. And then lately, the last 28 years, I've been a supervisor in a government mailroom, 2 government mailrooms, Internal Revenue Service and the Army Corps of Engineers. I've supervised the mail process at both those agencies, and that's been my income now for, like I said, the last 20. Well, for 8 years I was a janitor. That was some pain, some dues at that job. Janitors work pretty hard without really great pay.
Yeah.
And it's a hard job. It's very routine. There's not a whole lot of mental stimulation. I got by just by fantasizing that I was cleaning my soul, cleaning the floors. I was cleaning because I had a lot of guilt. I had a lot of guilt over not making it through law school. A lot of guilt about things I had done in the past, sexual experiences I had had, and the like. And I had a lot of guilt, so I would clean the floor, and I would think I'm cleaning my soul. So that's kind of how I got by as a janitor. But then at some point, my company, maybe we'll get into this. My company hired me because I had a mental illness, and I had no luck getting a good job otherwise. And they opened the mail room, and I immediately became the supervisor. And I've been doing that since 1995. And it's been a good job. It pays decent, over $20 an hour, and it's a job I can do well. That's been my income, and then I've also had a job at the church thrift store, which unfortunately is closing now. I don't know if you knew that, Dan. Steeple People, where we used to meet our poetry group, is closing, and it's going out of business because we could not find a new place when they're tearing down the building now that housed the business. I've been there also 28 years. I've been a manager there. And mental illness is just a story I can still function in regular society. Mental illness is not a factor on that job, and I'm a manager. I'm supposedly a leader at work, and they might know that I have mental illness, but it's not the focus. Whereas at the mailroom, it's much more prominent that people know that everybody in the mailroom has mental illness, and that it's a set-aside government contract, which is now being screwed around with by the state government. They say we're not competitively employed, and that we have to be working with people that do not have disabilities, and so we're fighting the battle. That's why I'm using my law school. We're trying to maybe come up with a legal angle to fight this new movement within state government. So that's a long-winded answer to the question.
So they are trying to stop having set-asides for people with mental illness?
Yeah. Yep. They want, and my argument about that is, well, do you take NHL hockey players and mix them in with basketball players, with baseball players? They could, when people specialize into a certain area, that's when they really excel. That's when things get done. That's when things reach a new level. When you got when you put a crowd of people with disabilities in a room, they get along and they excel. They do a good job. We've won national awards at the mailroom. We've gotten a lot of recognition, and the customers love us, and we can't see a better situation. They know us kind of as the group with the mental illness, yes, but they don't lower their demands or their needs. They still expect us to do the mail, and it's been great. Now the state government has gotten some idea that based on a Supreme Court ruling called Olmstead, that people with disabilities have to be mixed in with the mainstream of society. Every time I tried that, Dan, with the exception of Steeple People, which I found is a benevolent organization, every time I got mixed in with the general population at work, it did not go well. It did not go well.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that when you say it doesn't go well? Do people put you down, or do you just get nervous around them, or what?
I think it's more that I get nervous. There's a lack of awareness about my condition that the people that have the condition are aware of. They kind of are sensitive to the illness, and they are aware that I have a certain kind of condition. But when I go into the regular population, it's there's no recognition of, no acknowledgement, no acceptance of that. They think it's because I'm having a bad day. It's just a lack of awareness. And so I don't think that people necessarily single me out intentionally, but I get nervous, and I start feeling like I'm the sore thumb, and if I express anything of my feelings, what I'm thinking, it's disavowed and not acknowledged. Whereas if I tell somebody at the mailroom now, I'm kind of feeling spacey today, they give me space, and they don't judge me by that. They do not look down upon that. They understand because it happened to them too.
Yeah. Let me ask you, you earlier talked about having guilt about certain things in your life. Do you really mean guilt, or do you mean regret about, say, the mental illness or some of the jobs that you may have gotten, or some of the things that you wish you had? Is it guilt, or is it more regret? Because guilt implies that you recognize that you did something wrong, or you may have hurt someone, whereas regret is sort of non-accusatory.
Okay. At one time, I think it was guilt then. It was really guilt, something that I felt I had done wrong. And now, after years after the fact, it's turned into more, if anything, just a sense of regret. I think guilt has turned into regret. Less accusatory, less feeling like I have to make amends. I've made amends for the guilt I felt, and now I think I still have a certain amount of regret. For certainly driving under the influence and getting into the car accident, it's something I felt guilty about for years. But now it's a sense of regret. Why was I driving drunk? And I don't want to feel sorry for myself, but I still think I made a poor choice when I made that decision.
Yeah. So let's talk about the alcoholism. Do you think that the alcoholism stemmed from the mental illness and the accident, or do you think that you would have been an alcoholic even if that had never happened, the accident?
Well, I have to just go by what my friends ended up doing, and my friends drank as much as I did, or more, in high school and in college. Certainly, some of my friends drank more than I did, and they all tapered off. And now when we go out as friends, I have one beer, maybe 2 beers at the most. But in high school, it would have been 6 or 8 beers. You realize your body can't take that kind of toll. But when I had the accident, I lost a lot of, you can say I lost a lot of willpower. I lost a lot of ability. I lost a lot of sense of control. What I lost is, excuse me, I lost a lot of sense of control. And one of those things was control over my drinking. I didn't really get obliterated, but throughout the day I'd start drinking at about noon. By 10 o'clock I'd be kind of sloshed, kind of like a feeling I just had to have in my mind to relieve this pain I had from the injury. Now the pain from the injury is pretty well gone. It's been, 30, 40 years almost. That pain is gone, but I still have problems from schizophrenia. I have not. I think I'm well recovered, maybe 75% recovered, but some days I still have some issues where I have trouble getting myself motivated. I don't believe I would have had that problem. I would have settled into kind of a nice lifestyle, I believe. and not become an alcoholic without the car accident.
Let me just ask then about with the alcoholism and whatnot. Did you state? I may have misheard you. That when have you quit cold turkey, or do you occasionally have a drink?
Yes. No, I'm pretty convinced that the way things are now, once become an alcoholic, I would go down the tubes fast if I had a drink. I would start drinking heavily again, and it would be disastrous. Like pretty much like it was in Las Vegas. I had a period of sobriety when I worked at the Internal Revenue Service back in the 80s. I had a period of sobriety, was doing quite well, and I got through my first year of law school without drinking, and I was in about the middle of the class. I was holding my own, doing all right, and then second year I started drinking and went off my psychotropic meds, and it was disastrous. I got thrown out of a party. I slapped one of my law student friends in a moment of anger, and things that I would never done probably without alcohol. So I've just determined that alcohol is an anathema to me, and I can't touch it. I have made the decision. I've gone the AA route on that. I have total abstention.
So, do you remember the date you last had a drink? A lot of people do.
Yeah, I was drinking. I was homeless then, and of course I didn't have a lot of money. But the money I did have, I spent on booze, and I had some beers. It was January of 1984. In the middle of January, I was homeless, and I was drinking, and I was definitely in an altered state of mind, and I believed I could usher in the second coming of Christ, and so I thought I could bring back the Garden of Eden. I thought I had that kind of power. I wasn't sure, but I thought if I just have faith, I can do it. So I pushed my faith into actually taking off all my clothes on the downtown Skyway, and I thought everybody else would be forced to do that too. And I quickly found out that I did not have that kind of influence that I thought I did, and I got arrested, and that was the end of my drinking. I said, no more. I've gotten in enough trouble now.
Well, I know that you told this before. I know to people like me, and also I think you wrote about it in an article you wrote some years back. I don't know if you want to tell it now, but when you were in jail, didn't you have like an episode where you wanted to drink your own urine or something like that?
Yeah, it's a little bit embarrassing. It made sense to me. It's not that uncommon among the mentally ill to do stuff like that. Some people eat their feces. Anything to relieve that pain of the illness. It's like it made sense to me, and at that point, it's when those people when I took off all my clothes, I was feeling a tremendous amount of pressure and strain on my thinking, and I did not turn to the mental health system, which is what people wanted me to do. Instead, I thought I could handle it my own way, and that's what I came up with, take off all my clothes, and then I did not give up totally right then either, and I also thought drinking my own urine I could, relieve some of the pain, and it's a very messy kind of situation. But once I got under the doctors and got medication, I realized the folly in thinking that kind of thing was going to be helpful. I'd run into a guy some years previous to that believed in some kind of hoodoo god in Hawaii, and he did some stuff. He wouldn't tell me what it was, but I believe it was drinking animals' blood or stuff like that. And you run into people that had these off the wall kind of experiences, and I was really trying to understand it. And the best way I could understand it was by doing it myself. And now I just have gotten to a point in my life when I'm in about my low 60s, 60s. I'm 61. I don't need to try everything to experience everything. I have experienced enough, and I don't need to know what it's like to actually taste urine or what it's actually like to kill somebody, on a more serious note. I don't need to, but some people out there just feel they have to experience everything, and that's kind of how I was, but no longer.
You mentioned Jesus when you talked about the Skyway incident where you took off your clothes. So when did you become a born-again Christian? Were you still an alcoholic when you had your conversion, or did Jesus come after you decided to abstain from alcohol?
Okay, that's a good question because I was very unorthodox. I was raised with the idea that Jesus was God, but although my parents pretty much promoted the idea that he was a good man, and that's what I should concentrate on. But like I said, my parents did not want to really tell me how it was. They wouldn't let me figure that out for myself. And so I had kind of an idea that Christ might be God, but I didn't really believe it. And then I had the car accident, and about a week after that, I was out in nature down at a park in Minneapolis, the Minnehaha Fall, and I sensed the power of God around me, and it was like a leap. It was a leap that I took, and I sensed there was an angel in my presence, and I kind of said, "Come into my heart," and so then I had kind of the experience of what God felt like, and it was very overwhelming to me because I knew how far I was from that kind of traditional belief. I did not at that time before the angel. I did not believe there was a power like that. I didn't understand it, and I didn't believe in it. I certainly didn't have it in my life. But then when I met the angel, and it was like a very powerful event. And I did not change though. I kept drinking. I tried to convert people when I was a bartender. I tried to convert them to religious Christianity, and I wanted them to know that they could still drink and do what they were doing, despite the fact that they were Christian. And I was getting a lot of jokes about it and stuff like that. But that didn't work. Drinking and carrying on like I was not, I believe, acceptable to maybe if it was acceptable by Christ at any level, it certainly wasn't acceptable by most church-going Christians. And so I kind of had like a dichotomy in my life, wanting to be a Christian and wanting to respect and love Christ, for what he was, and still carrying on with a kind of a fast lifestyle. I had a big dichotomy, and that didn't really resolve itself until I got arrested for taking my clothes off. That was the last really bizarre thing I had done, and even my friends that were wild thought that was going too far, and so it kind of tore me down. And I started talking to my grandparents, and my grandparents started questioning me about this angel. They would just throw pointed questions at me, and how had church been that Sunday? Well, I haven't gone to church, Grandma. What? And I did not want to let go of this relationship I had with the angel, so I started going to church, and then pretty soon I learned that, hey, a lot of my ideas are pretty wrong according to what most people that believe in Christ think, and I wasn't serious about it, and I'm still not 100%, walk the straight narrow path, but I do believe there is a path that you should walk if you're a Christian, and I try to walk that now. I would say I became a traditional Christian when I joined church in 1984, March of 1984, when I was 29 years old.
Well, you say traditional Christian, so you don't consider yourself a born-again Christian?
Yeah, I do consider myself born again. I underwent a big change in my life, upheaval. I began with the angel that I saw back in 1978, but I did not really talk about it with any luck or any kind of satisfaction to anybody else until I got to church. And they all thought the angel was very cool. Now, my doctors, of course, thought the angel was pure delusion and that I should not, I should not listen to that voice and should not follow it. And my doctor, hopefully I'm not a bigot or I'm not a elitist, but my doctor was Jewish, and he didn't have any time for a Christian angel. He didn't want to hear about it, and nobody really wanted to hear about it. My friends, I tried telling them about it. They didn't want to hear it either. It wasn't until I got to church and people said, "That's a pretty cool thing," and that's really when I became, I would say, born again. Is I said my life was as a Christian, and I better take that seriously. And so I've been a Christian now since 1984, with some moments of backsliding, I would say, but pretty much a pretty strong belief, and definitely in the things that I choose to do with my time. I will do things that I believe Christ wants me to, which is very traditional form of Christianity. To have a personal relationship with Christ is a very traditional Christian, I would say.
What denomination were you raised in, and what denomination of church do you go to now?
I was raised a Lutheran, and then my parents switched over to the Congregationalist Church sometime after I was in high school, and I did not really go along with some of the dogma in Lutheran. I thought it was chanting certain phrases that didn't have a lot of meaning to me. But when I got to a United Methodist Church that I was invited to by a friend of mine, I got really enthused when I found out they believed in good works. They believed that you should make your religion work. And that's what made sense to me. And that's when I got my job at Steeple People. And that's when I got my job at my cook mailroom. Because I believed I was doing the work of God, the work of Christianity. Kind of like a Jimmy Carter kind of idea, I guess. You know, he'd be somebody that I would say, I'd aspire a life like his. You know, where I believe he makes his decisions based on his religion and how he's going to, his habitat with humanity and some of the things he's done, you know, post-presidency. I believe, and there's a guy at church that I kind of not idolize, that's the wrong word, but I think I look up to him. He's lived a life where he's helped a lot of people, and there is a lot of need out in society, and I could not be blind to that. I was unable to just shut that out. You know, I have to believe with my religion that I'm supposed to be working to alleviate some of the inequality, some of the injustices that there are. That's also how I felt in law school. I had the vision of the angel before I went to law school, and when I approached law, I thought, you know, how can I get justice for these people that look to you with the blank faces and just hopeless and lost and really kind of screwed over by society? How can I ever reach them? Not only reach them, but how can I help the situation?
It's now.
So that's why I like the United Methodists, because they believe that same kind of thing. They believe that you should, if you have a faith, you should be able to make it come alive in the world.
Yeah, we are.
They don't.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We are recording this now. It's almost 9 p.m. in the evening Central Time on Sunday, December 25th. So it's Christmas evening, Christmas Day evening as we are recording this. And so is this a special day for you because you're a believer, or did you go to church this morning? What does Christmas mean to you then? Now,
Okay, I've never been one into such big ritual. Um, Important events. I went to church last night, the Christmas Eve service. That's always meaningful to me, and I enjoy the pageantry and all the bright lights and the happy feelings. That's always a fun thing. But for me, Christianity is going to work in the morning with people that are suffering from mental illness and making them have a good day. You know, I'm not into big showmanship about Christianity or the big facades. I'd rather be I'd rather be known as a person that really believes and really follows the messages. And I believe Christ himself was more that way. He didn't shun the spotlight, but he was he if he was truly what they say he was, he could have been a real showman. But he more or less did the hard work and healed people and preached to them and gave them hope. And that's kind of the vein I would like to go. And maybe delude myself. I mean, I enjoy telling my story. I do that on a regular basis, and I enjoy being in the spotlight sometimes. But basically, I'm for results. You know, what works, what actually helps people, and that. And I think some people are much more tied into like what hymns we sing on Christmas Eve, how they hold the hymnal, how they don't lose face among their friends. They're more into what I would call surface things, and they're not into the deeper sacrifices that Christ made. And I don't think some of them even understand the sacrifices he made. And
well,
so, in answer to your question, Christmas, the fact that I'm doing this on Christmas does not seem sacrilegious. In fact, I thought it'd be a good thing to do.
yeah.
It's a positive experience for me, and I'm doing it on Christmas. That's so much the better.
Well, are you involved in any way with as a church elder? Do you ever go and speak to kids in Sunday school or anything like that?
No, kids have been a problem for me. Not a problem, but I didn't have my own kids. And I enjoy kids when they come into the thrift store where I work. I tease them and have fun with them. But the mental illness has been something that I don't want to be written off as some kind of, what would you say, pervert, or a mental case. I don't want to be written off that way. Yet I think it'd be easy for a kid to see me that way. So I've always been a little bit kind of almost shy about getting to know a kid too well because they might not be able to get their head around somebody that has a mental illness. So I kind of take a hands-off approach to kids and kind of just I don't feel like I'm a good mentor of kids. My life, was pretty much altered by college. And I believe the message I do have, Dan, is that don't drive drunk because look what can happen. It pretty much altered my life in the ways most people would think are not so good. And I've come to grips with it, and I think I have a good life. But my main message to kids would be don't drive drunk, look what can happen. In that kind of sense, I would be a good mentor to kids, I believe.
How about the church? Do they know of your mental ills and your alcoholism? Do they accept you for that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not widely known, I don't think, but people that know me, I certainly haven't tried to hide it. I haven't tried to avoid that topic. Some people know me for years and find out I have schizophrenia, and they say, Bruce, I never job because it's not the focus. It's just another illness. It's like a broken leg. It's an illness that you don't have to be stigmatized by, and I'm still learning how to handle it. At church, I think they know that I work at the thrift store. That's what they focus on. And for a long time, I drove seniors to church. I don't do that right now, but I drove seniors, and they knew me as a church bus rider.
Yeah.
And I don't find the judgment at church. I think when church people become judgmental is when they just determine that you're not doing the best job you can with your life. But if you're doing the best job you can, church people, I believe, are some of the most supportive people that there are.
You'd mentioned first guilt and then regrets. You said that you're 61 now, and so you said you don't have any children. Is one of the biggest regrets of your life that you never got married or never had children? And do you, at this point in your life, have you sort of given up perhaps on ever finding someone to share the remainder of your life with?
No, I have not given up. I've been looking for that for a long time. In 1987 was the last time I was in a committed relationship, and that was a good one. The problem was that she was significantly older than me. She was 22 years older than me, and I found that insurmountable. But I still look, I've determined that I will not have children. I don't think it's a wise thing for people in their 60s to have children. But I got a couple women in my life right now that could. I have one woman friend that I date and bring to plays at the local theater, and I have another woman that's very involved with helping people. She's a former lawyer, and she that's kind of people I'm attracted to. People that are kind of under the mainstream, and I was very mainstream before the accident. It kind of threw me into a new territory because I had too many issues with too many maybe you could call them strikes against me. Driving drunk it would be a strike against me in a lot of people's book. But I found people that would accept me, and that's really what I've gone with. People that still think that I have a decent life, even though I made some poor decisions.
Okay, well, let's take a break here, and in the next segment, I want to talk about a little bit more about spirituality and also get into your writing and art, how you got into that as well, and we'll do that in a moment. Continuing my discussion with Bruce Ario, a poet that I've known for almost a quarter of a century. So before I get to talking about art and poetry and how we met, let me just continue with a few more points regarding your religion and spiritual stuff. You, as far as I know, have always been very religious, but you've always been that sort of odd person who is a liberal who's very religious. Most people, when they think of very religious people, they think of fundamentalist conservatives and whatnot. How would you describe your own religious views? Do you subscribe to fundamentalist views? I mean, would you recommend to a young person to remain a virgin until they got married? Would you how would you classify your own beliefs as a Christian?
Well, I can't really discuss religion without discussing what I felt about Christ. And to me, fundamentalists put him in a whole different field from other human beings. They say he was God and that he was just absolutely unique like no other human being. For me, Christ was a man that achieved very high heights of spiritual experience and maybe he was chosen by God. I do believe he was. But for me, he's not a whole lot different than what a Shakespeare or an Abraham Lincoln, somebody that attains very high heights. Now, the fundamentalists want to say they have to do everything that Christ tells them. They have this very personal relationship with Christ, and they feel they do not want to be diverted for that. Now, I think, in my mind, I'm a little more open-minded into having experiences and to, trying different things, and even trying to understand what this one guy was with Satanism, trying to figure out what Satanism is all about. I don't think you'd ever find a fundamentalist Christian that would consider the idea of Satanism as a lifestyle and entertain thoughts about what that means. They won't get out of the starting blocks trying to figure out anything. But I always had a curious mind, and I always wanted to know about things. And I believe Christ had a curious mind. I believe he was curious about what God wanted him to do. I believe, he followed what he thought was God's path for him to the end. But he's not a lot different than my book. He's not unrelated to a Shakespeare or an Abraham Lincoln who has attained very high things too in life. And I find comfort in some of the things Shakespeare writes and some of the things that Abraham Lincoln said. I find comfort from that in the same way I find comfort. Christ is special to me because, and I know I know you're going to consider this off the wall, but I do believe he was raised from the dead. I believe that. And he overcame death. And so I believe at some level I have another life after this one, because the angel was evidence to me that there is life outside of this human existence. So it kind of all fits together. But I don't want to be written off as any fanatical and tossed off into the warehouse as an evangelistic Christian, because I still believe I'm part of this world, and I'm interested in politics. I'm interested in art. I'm interested in work. I got a lot of interest, and I'm not going to be warehoused off into something that is irrelevant to the everyday world.
So you earlier had mentioned about a doctor of yours being Jewish, and you said you didn't want to be thought of as a bigot. So what are your views about non-Christians? Do you think that, say, a Jew or a Muslim or a Buddhist or an atheist or other people who are non-Christians, do you think that they are lost, that they don't have the real, or they're going to hell?
Absolutely not. That's kind of what I was getting to with my point about Shakespeare and Abraham Lincoln. I believe Muhammad had a very lofty experience with his religion. Some of the other great leaders in the other religions, Buddha, Gandhi. Gandhi wasn't particularly a religious figure, but some of the other people that follow these other people, that's completely acceptable. I find myself, though, getting kind of competitive with them. Just so I don't say I don't claim that I buy the Muslim line 100%, not nearly as much as I buy the Christian path to God, just because it's probably how I was raised. But on the other hand, I'm certainly not going to judge somebody that was raised that way who finds deep meaning in that kind of religion. As long as I can see evidence of it, that they are sincere and they do have beliefs. There's a lot of people out there that do outrageous things in the name of religion. You've known that, and I don't go along with that. I don't think anybody achieves a close relationship with God by being a bigot or by hating. But no, as a path to God, certainly, I don't think there's only one way. No.
So let's talk about poetry and art and writing. I opened this interview by mentioning that people who have looked at my website Cosmoetica would have seen your name, or they would have seen some of your writings on my website. They would have seen some of the poetry videos I've done of some of your poems. When did you start writing? Were you just scribbling in a diary as a child? And when did you start?
Well, I wrote a poem when I was in, I believe, 5th grade that was read on the radio, and that was my first success. But the truth is, I had some help from my mother with that one, and I did not really get the bug to write until after I left law school. I had been an economics major in college, which is not really particularly artsy, and then I went into law school, which is not particularly artsy, and I just found out that I am a creative person. I enjoy creativity. I enjoy creating. I enjoy that aspect, and found those other occupations and institutions stifling, and I found out that I enjoy writing and creating characters and sharing my ideas with other people. Now, the first time I started writing was with a psychologist. I had been arrested when I took off all my clothes on the Skyway, and I got court committed to a halfway house. And she said to me, "Bruce, what do you want to do with your life?" And I said, "Joan, I got to go back to law school." Because I felt kind of forced into that. It's something it's like you start something, you want to finish it. A lot of people feel that. And that's kind of where I was at. And she goes, "Bruce, anything besides law school, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Okay, Joan." I always thought writers were kind of cool. I said, this was kind of like my movement to opening all the doors and, and taking a big leap. I said I wanted to be a writer. And she said, "Okay, write me something." So I wrote her a poem. And she liked it, and I believed her. And I started writing more poetry. And then I joined the Playwright Center, and about that time, I met you in the open mics at the Coffee Gallery and the like. I believe that's basically where I saw you, was at the Coffee Gallery.
Yeah.
And I thought this is a good life. It's a good use of my mental energy is to write and be like these other people.
That was, I think we met around 1993. So were you writing for 2 or 3 years before then?
I started writing in 86.
86?
I wrote poetry mainly.
Yeah.
Poetry my first 5 years, and then I got into the Playwright Center in 91, and I believe it was a couple years later that I started going to open mics and seeing you and some of the others.
Yeah.
Yeah. I went playwright, and then lately, the last 10 years or so, I've been concentrating on novels.
Mm. I
do write occasional poetry. I haven't written a play now in about 10 years. But I do write occasional poems. I have a collection of poems. Some nights I'll just have a burning idea that I have to get down and write a poem.
Yeah.
Basically, I'm knocking off pages in a novel. I try to write a page a day. That's my goal. It's a page a day.
Yeah. So I know, well, just so people know, I remember years ago before I left Minnesota, hopefully if anything ever happens to you, there's still the paper that says that I would be able to have charge of your writing so that it doesn't get lost.
Yeah.
But I know you. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, at Christmas time, I also got all my material onto a CD, all my main works, and sent it to my 3 brothers, 1 copy each of them. So in case there's a fire, it's not, everything's not lost.
Well, if you can, send me a copy of them too. If you can make a copy for me.
Absolutely, I will.
Okay. Now I know your first book that you wrote, your first novel, I think, was City Boy. And I thought that was a really, well, both Jessica and I and other people at the Uptown Poetry Group, the UPG, had thought very highly of it. And I remember you've written some other stuff that was not biographical. Do you think that are you writing novels as a form of therapy, or is it more or less that you have something to say?
I think I'm in a transition, and I think City Boy was a form of therapy for me, and many people have responded that it's like I was writing for myself rather than an audience. In fact, some of my views about other people are not really that highly thought out and reasoned out. The main character is the city, which is people in general. But as far as specific, there's only one other individual in the story, and that's me. And I believe I was doing therapy on myself at that time. But I think I'm transitioning now into entertaining the ideas of interaction with some characters, with other characters. And I think I'm more trying to get to the point where I got something to say, something that is a accurate portrayal, and something with some hope and some resolution and some kind of feeling that I can convey about some speakers or some characters relating to other people. I've been alone for a long time. I'm not in a relationship, so that kind of makes me suffer a little bit of experience in that area. But I do work. I interact with people at work.
I just lost Bruce for a few minutes there, but I've got him back. So let us continue on. I was asking about writing, and I know that one of the things that with your poetry and also with City Boy, it seemed to me that when you are creating or writing a poem or a longer work, and you're just sort of in a flow, you tend to write better. And I found that when you're trying to actually put a message in something, your writing becomes more self-conscious and not as good. Do you think that your experience with poetry or writing in general is like that? Do you think that you write better when you just something comes to you rather than when you think things through too much?
I think that's true, Dan. That's always been a problem. You can call it a problem that I've had. I think I get to a point. I can point most poignantly to a relationship I was in, and it was going just fine when I was just going with the flow and taking things as they came. But then when I really tried to get meaningful and tell the person, the woman, how much she meant to me and how much I felt for her, and tried to get serious, the relationship changed, and she didn't like that. And I think that's the same way in my art. I get to the point where I tell stories, I'm happy-go-lucky, I tell a good story, and it's going fine. And then I get to the point where I really want to see something meaningful, and it suffers in the way that you're talking about. It's not quite. What I really want to say is maybe not as good as when I'm kind of shooting from the hip or going off the cuff and just kind of telling a story. And so sometimes the work, something that has been lost on me. People make that comment, that they made about City Boy. I said, first, the section when you were a boy, you were just talking about your experiences and how much fun you were having and stuff like that. And then you got very serious, and you had to convey the deep meaning of every word. And
well, I know that.
That was not.
I know that when we read a later version of City Boy, both Jessica and I, she had seen some points where you had changed some endings to chapters and a few other passages because other people who were not writers had told you they didn't like something, and it was very frustrating because you removed really good lines or good observations in favor of the more cliched or the more crowd pleasing. Do you when you give poems to someone, do you ever take into account their experience with writing? Because if I give a poem or a story that I've written to someone who I know is just a non-artist, if they like it, that's fine. But I listen more to people who I know more about the craft.
I'm learning about the craft. I'm 61 years old. I hope I have at least 30 more years to learn the craft. I make a lot of mistakes in my writing, and I have made some poor judgments. And that includes City Boy. I mean, after reading it now, after publishing it, I would go back and make a lot of changes. And some changes I would go back to the original. It'd be different. But I always thought the best thing to do was keep moving and take advice like you're giving. If you give me advice, take that into consideration. But keep moving forward. That's what I really glean from other people's criticism is that I don't take it really personally or under the skin. I take it more as advice that I just maybe consider, but keep moving.
You started writing poetry. I remember when I first met you, you were generally writing just free verse lines. Then, at some point, you started writing your poems in a form where you would have four stanzas, basically 10 lines and four stanzas. A three-line stanza, which is a tercet, a second tercet, a third tercet, and then a one-line stanza.
I credit you with that, Dan. You're the one that coined the phrase Ario.
But you're the one who actually started writing like that. I mean, I just gave it your name,
yeah.
but
you noticed it.
Yeah. Well, what drew you to that? I mean, consciously, did you make a choice and say, "Well,
I wanted a form that kind of expressed how my thoughts went, and my goal was this kind of set up in the first three tercets, starting with the first one, then a little more development, and then go something that's just a non sequitur off into space somewhere as the final line. And that seemed to be the way, and it didn't seem like a non sequitur to me, but the reader, I thought, would interpret it that way. It seemed like the final line was just something that was a whole new idea going off in a different direction. To me, it all hung together, but that's just how I thought. That's the nature of what happened to me with my mental illness, is that all of a sudden, sometimes my mind will just go off into a different direction. And sometimes I go with that, sometimes I try to stifle that, depending on what we're dealing with. But in poetry, I thought it was a good thing to entertain, and you were the one that really kind of gave me support for doing that and writing that kind of poetry, where you gave me a lot of support and a lot of compliments on some of my writing that did that. And so I decided to really, basically 99% of my poems are in that form now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of like the free verse equivalent of a sonnet, or especially a Shakespearean sonnet, which is four quartet, 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 and then couplet. So let me ask you about when you first started writing. You said in '86, and you said you then joined the Playwright Center. I didn't start the Uptown Poetry Group until 1995, and it ran until 2003, when Jessica, my wife, and I left the Twin Cities, and we had 200 consecutive meetings. It was, I believe, on the first and last, I think it was, the first and last Friday evenings of the month. And other than me, who was to all 200, you came, I think, to the most UPGs. I think you only missed 3 or 4 during the whole time. So let me ask you about some of the other groups, writing groups that you've been to, and then the Uptown Poetry group. What was the first writing group that you ever went to?
Uh, I think it was the Uptown Poetry group. I've taken some classes at the Loft. I know you're not a big, you know what the Loft is, and you're not a big proponent of their style of teaching. I learned some things at the Loft, but the Uptown Poetry, it appealed to me because it was kind of like counterculture in a way, you know. It's like a real community where I believed, like Ginsberg or like my hero Bob Dylan, they would like that kind of group. My other groups were much more traditional. Like you should have said instead of the, and you should have said black instead of white, and and criticize me in that way. But the Uptown Poetry group I found to be much more challenging and much more interesting. Like there's a sense of humor that was there that I really thrived off of, and we all got along. We weren't easy on each other, and I still remember you as being quite hard on a couple people. But I thought, hey, this is sincere stuff. This is what art is. It's not, saying instead of the and black instead of white. It's not dotting the I's and crossing the T's. It's more like the aura that you create or the feeling that you emote. And I enjoyed the Uptown Poetry group. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Do you remember?
The other writing.
Do you remember going? Hold on. Do you remember? Because I think, I did meet you first at the Coffee Gallery. I think a few times I saw you at the Ophelia's Pale Lily groups with that fellow Brian who used to run it.
Yeah, that was like Uptown Poetry Group Light.
Yeah.
It was. I thought it was a little bit artsy. I mean, it wasn't as bad as some of the writing groups I'd been in, but it was all tiptoeing around things. And I think at Uptown Poetry Group we cut to the chase.
Yeah.
We enjoyed. I think the egos involved in Uptown Poetry Group were much more at stake. And I think at the other groups we tiptoed around each other's egos, and at the expense of creating less good art.
Mm-hmm.
Art that wasn't as good.
Yeah, I knew you mentioned how the first couple of years we would go around to people's places, but then a lot of people came and went, and there was maybe about 7 or 8 people who were regulars or semi-regulars, and we then for about, I don't know, a few years did most of the stuff at the Steeple people. Did what other than the artistic stuff, did you develop, and other than myself, did you develop any relationships with, friendships with anyone else that went there on a fairly regular basis?
Not really.
No.
I mean, there's one woman that shopped at Steeple People thrift store where I work, and I saw her recently, it's about 6 months ago. We still say hi, and I'm friends with Terry Foltz.
Oh, okay.
I believe.
Yeah.
You might know him.
Yeah.
And David Lettieri, I think that was his name.
Yeah.
He comes into Steeple People, and we still say hi, but you were really the focus of that group, and I got to know you, and I stayed in contact with you. But I've had the artistic friendships I have right now are basically tied up into a group I go to through my work. Mm. It's called the Task Writers Group, and we're definitely not at the level of Uptown Poetry Group. We're kind of fledgling. I miss the Uptown Poetry Group.
Yeah.
I'm looking for another writing group, and I will have some more time now. Thrift Store is closing. That's been a significant investment in time for me to work that job, and I've missed out on a lot of activities that I can get into a writing group, find a good one, that I really enjoy and really gives me benefit. I couldn't do that when I worked at Steeple People. The Uptown Poetry Group was on a Friday night. I could do that, but I missed out on some of those other experiences because I've had to work at Steeple People. My goal is to write a page a day, and it's something that I process through the day, and then at night I go home and write it down.
So what place does writing, whether it's poetry or prose, occupy for you? Is it on a par with your religious beliefs? I mean, do you look at yourself as equally a writer or an artist as you do a Christian?
Yeah, I think Christianity is way up there because of the trouble I had. I think when I put more and more of that experience behind me and develop more, I think writing is going to become more important. Hopefully, I'll be writing in retirement and be able to spend a lot more time at it. Even now that Steeple People is going to have more time to really focus on writing, and importantly, do some reading because I'm not so good at that. I don't have time to read, and I think to be a good writer, you have to be reading. You have to be knowing what's out there and respond to what other people are doing. You can't be an artist in a vacuum.
Yeah.
I think you have to be aware of what's out there.
Speaking of that, I remember around the time, maybe a year or so before I left the Twin Cities, maybe it was around 01 or 02, I remember you had gone to a trip to Haiti or something with your church. Do you still do things like that where you go and do volunteer work or whatever it might have been in other countries?
I haven't done other countries. Right now, my big volunteer job is being a facilitator of a support group with dual diagnosis. And that's mental illness plus one addiction, which can be alcohol, sex, gambling, overeating, an addiction, two addictions. And that's kind of where I put, if I'm doing anything to really support other people, that's a big area I'm in right now. I've gotten away because it seems like I've always found somebody to kind of lead me along the path of helping other people. And the older gentleman that I mentioned at church that used to go to Haiti all the time, he's in his 96th year, and he's not gone to Haiti lately. Subsequently, I haven't gone to Haiti lately. But I did launch out into this being a facilitator support group, and I have some 20-year-olds that have been coming, and it's been quite enlightening for me. It's been a great source of satisfaction to think that I'm helping them some of the struggles I had at that time in my life, and that's what I'm doing right now. And Steeple People, I consider Steeple People a benefit to society.
So you earlier had mentioned how you totally abstain from alcohol. To combat mental illness, do you take a battery of drugs every day, like medicine pills?
Yeah.
How many pills a day do you take?
About 9.
9.
Is 3 of them? Let's see. 4 of them are for diabetes, which I contracted because of a pill I take for my mental illness. 4 are for thought disorder. And that was always a hard pill for me to swallow because I always thought of myself as a good thinker. And for me to be diagnosed with a thought disorder has become quite a challenge, And I'm still trying to prove to the doctors that my thinking is just fine. It's just the stress I feel that makes it seem that I have a disorder. And but anyway, I take 4 pills for mental illness and about 4 pills for diabetes, and one for cholesterol, something like that. One for sleeping. One for sleeping.
Well, you've mentioned a few times doctors, and when you've mentioned it, your face sort of turns a little bit. Do you have? I mean, are you under like a court order that you have to take these medicines, or is it that you just have said, "Well, I may not agree with it, but I wasn't doing too well by myself, so I'm going to listen to whatever they say"?
That's my word as
Yeah.
You know, I believe I've got my life moving forward. For a long time, it wasn't when I tried to do things my way. It's kind of like if the doctors say take these pills and you will better, you won't go out of your mind in the bedroom thinking how monotonous it is. It's maybe not the best solution, but it is a solution to take medications that make me feel calmer and tracking better. I decided to go that route. Yeah.
Earlier in the interview, you had mentioned you wanted to speak about the tools of law and using them for mental illness advocacy. What were you talking about then? Explain.
Well, I give my story. I speak maybe 4 times a month, sometimes as many as 10 times a month. I go out to groups. Sometimes it's police officers, sometimes it's nurses, sometimes it's housing people. I tell my story of mental health just so they know they can become familiar with what somebody with a mental illness is going through. Now, it seems like they would already know this, but they don't. It's all new to them, and it's a new experience, and they're always surprised by what I have to say, and they're interested in it, and so I tell my story, and I think I use a lot of skills to tell my story that I learned in law school, like such as putting my best foot forward and advocating for a position, and I basically advocate for tolerance for people with mental illness, for understanding, for sympathy, for support in the work environment so people get a job. The unemployment rate for mentally ill people is out of this, is beyond the pale. It's like 80% unemployment, and it's just some area that I have found now that I can use some of the knowledge, some of the skills I learned in law school to make it seem better.
Mm. So, if you look back on your life now, with all the travails, with having to take medicines, with having to avoid alcohol, with your involvement in the church, involvement in art, would you? I mean, clearly, you probably, when you were a young man, would not have said, "Well, I'd love to have been married and have some kids and what." Do you consider your life now a success, even despite some of your failures?
Yeah, yes, I do, because I consider I've had to work harder. When I was growing up, my dad created a kind of a playground for us. My parents, both of them, I guess. It was a lot of fun, and we had good times. And my ambition was to keep that going the rest of my life. And then when I had the car accident and began to have problems, I really fought it and tried really hard to bring back that other part of life and that other sense of joy. And I have found that it's been in a different place than I expected, but I have found success. I think, when people tell me that I'm a good speaker, that they learn something from me, that probably means as much to me as winning a court case would have. And I think when I have a friend that I can go to the Guthrie with and sit next to her and drive play, that means as much as having a wife. And,
Yeah.
yeah, I consider success. I consider, in some ways, I had to play the cards that were dealt to me, and I've done pretty good with that. And I think I've responded to the condition quite well.
You mentioned that you have brothers who are around your age, a little older, a little younger. Do you often go to visit them? What is your relationship now with your brothers and any nieces, nephews you might have?
It's pretty good. I was just out to my brother's house last night for dinner. Two nieces and one nephew were there. I did quite a bit of talking with them. Gave them a Christmas gift. It was just kind of neat. They seem to have. They don't look at me as like the unmarried, the oddball. They don't. They don't. They they don't look at me that way. They look at me as having a decent life. They like to hear about my speeches. I write them stories. They love them. I'm considered one of the family.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me end this second segment, and in the final segment, we'll wrap things up with a few more questions. We'll do that in a moment. I am finishing up my interview with Bruce Ario. He's a writer and poet that I have known for almost a quarter of a century now. And I usually like to end all my interviews, whether it's these ones or my Dan Schneider video interviews, by giving you a final say-so about something. But before I do that, I'm doing these interviews, these bioramas, and they have a different purpose than my interviews with scientists and other, people, academics, and whatnot, in that these are interviews with people that I've known in my life, in my past life, and I'm doing that so that people in the future will know some of the people that were surrounded in my life, the things that they went through in the late 20th, early 21st century. So I want to ask you if you can maybe look ahead to a time maybe after you and I are both long dead in 50 or 100 years or something, and if someone somewhere, either some biographer or some fan of your writing or my writing, or someone who maybe just discovers these interviews online and watches them and says, wow, these are interesting people who lived back 80, 100 years ago. Because, we can't look back at the pioneer days and listen to what people sounded like, much less what they had to say. But if you were to talk to someone in, say, 100 years, and whatever their life may be, what things about your life in particular, and what things about the society that you've lived in, would you want them to know about, that they could relate to as human beings, that you think will be similar?
Okay, that's a tough question. I haven't given it a lot of thought. I don't know if I'll have any kind of legacy, but if I was to have a legacy, I would want to say follow your dream. And that's basically what I've chosen to do as being a writer. I started with the psychologist that I mentioned. She said, what do you want to do with your life? And of course, I wanted to go the same route I had always gone. I wanted to be a lawyer. I thought I had to be a lawyer. And she goes, besides that. And so I went with my biggest dream. And it's been a trip. It's been an encouraging thing to follow my dream of being a writer. And I would encourage anybody, whether it's your dream to be a nurse or a writer or a professor, follow your dream. Follow your dream. That's what I would tell anybody at any time, at any point in their life. Don't let anybody get in your way. Do what you want to do. Provided with the added limitation that it doesn't hurt anybody. Mm-hmm. Don't do something you think is going to hurt somebody. But follow your dream. Follow your dream into what you. And I believe that's what you've done, Dan. And I see people that follow their dreams, and they got something in their life that is always going to be there. And whether it's just to be a lifeguard at a pool at the YMCA, as long as they follow the dream. I ran into too many people that had big regrets, and I have no. You asked me if I had regrets. Well, it would be nice to not have the car accident, but I believe on the other hand, throwing me into a new lifestyle that's as exciting as anything I would have ever done before. I've had doors open for me that would have never been opened. I met people I wouldn't have met you. There's a lot of people I would have never met, and never been challenged in the ways that I've been challenged. I would have been challenged in a different way, but I think it would have been a lot of societal mores and society's little parties and stuff like that, giving gifts and supporting my lawyer friends if I'd become a lawyer. Now I'm pretty much my own person. I pretty much do what I want to do. And I wouldn't advise anybody to go that route, especially in America where we have the freedom to do that. I believe we have a lot more freedom to do that in America than in other places.
Well, I will link to your website below this video so people who want to find out about your writing or any of your mental illness advocacy can go to your website. But now, just to end this interview, other than looking ahead to the future, is there any kind of advice you would want to give to people of today, whether it's about if they have mental illness, how to go about getting diagnosed, or that, or you mentioned AA. If you wanted to say anything about people who need to treat an addiction, is there anything, closing remarks you wanted to say to people like that?
Well, the closing remark I would make is take risks. Take risks. I don't have much to say about the mental health system. It's been kind of a bittersweet thing with me. Some things I like about it, some things I'm not so in love with. I choose to remain anonymous about. I should maybe even mention that in the interview because I'm not very public about that. It's okay, that I did, and a lot of people do. But I think if I was going to offer anybody advice on what to do in life, take risk. Throw your idea out there. Take your plan and go with it. And if it doesn't work out, that's too bad. And if it does work out, you're so much the better. That's my closing remark. Is go ahead and take that risk.
Well, thanks, Bruce, and hopefully we'll have many more years of being in touch online and maybe off. I do hope that you do keep writing, and I hope that whatever you have hopes for the future, that you do realize them. So thanks for spending your Christmas evening with me.
Thanks, Dan. Look forward to staying in touch.